have a lot of skeletal muscle in our body. We have anywhere from 650 to 850 skeletal muscles in our body. And I know that sounds like a wide range, but really the difference comes from debate on whether or not we consider a muscle group, or if we take that group of muscles and dissect it into smaller muscles. But in either case, 650, that's a lot of muscle. We know that we use skeletal muscle to move our body, but skeletal muscle has other functions too. For example, not moving the body. Right now you're not running a marathon, you're probably sitting down watching this video, and you're not doing a lot of moving, but you have a lot of skeletal muscles that are contracting. If all of your skeletal muscles relax right now, you'd fall out to the floor, right? And this is because we have to contract skeletal muscle to maintain position. Sit up straight. We also use skeletal muscle to regulate body temperature. When we get cold, signals are sent to our muscles telling our muscles to contract involuntarily, and we know this as shivering. When our muscles contract, they produce heat as a byproduct, and this heat can be used to warm our body. We also use skeletal muscle for respiration. The diaphragm and the muscles between our ribs are used for this process of respiration. And we also use skeletal muscle for protection. If someone came up behind you and punched you in the side of your back, there's no bones there, right? But there's muscle there to protect the underlying organs, so your kidneys don't get damaged when someone hits you, in your back. Muscles also protect openings too, such as the opening to the urethra. There's a sphincter there called the urethral sphincter that protects that opening. But overall, the main function of skeletal muscle is to move our body. And to do this, the skeletal muscle usually is moving bones. I say usually because sometimes the skeletal muscle is moving some sort of soft tissue, like when you do this. Smiling, right? With smiling, what's moving here is not a bone, but it's soft tissue around our mouth, right? Most of the time, like I said, those skeletal muscle is moving bones. Muscles are connected to bones through a type of structure called a tendon. So tendons are made of connective tissues, which makes sense because the job of the tendon is to connect the muscle to the bone. All skeletal muscles have certain things in common. They all have nervous system input coming in to communicate with the muscle. So nerves are organs in the body that carry messages to and from our skeletal muscles. All skeletal muscles have a really good supply of blood. So all skeletal muscles have a lot of blood vessels. And this is because skeletal muscles have a very high demand for oxygen and nutrients because they use a lot of energy. And in order to get that energy, they're going to need things like oxygen and glucose. These blood vessels not only are delivering things, but they're also removing waste. All skeletal muscles also have connective tissue membranes associated with them. So a membrane is a sheet-like structure. So these are sheet-like structures that are wrapping around the whole entire muscle and smaller pieces within the muscle itself. And all of these connective tissue membranes, they merge to form the tendon. And of course, the tendon connects the muscle to the bone. All muscles also have cells in them, and the main cell type found in a skeletal muscle is called a muscle fiber. And this is a confusing thing for students because muscle fiber doesn't really sound like the name of a cell. It sounds like a string or something, right? But indeed, we do call skeletal muscle cells muscle fibers. And the reason why we call them muscle fibers is because a skeletal muscle cell is very, very, very long and thin. Very, very thin. It's so thin we can't see it with the naked eye, but it is really long. Most skeletal muscle fibers are as long as the muscle is. So we have some skeletal muscle fibers, some skeletal muscle cells that are over a foot long. That's one cell over a foot long. That's really long. The only cells in the body that are bigger are neurons. When we look at the structure of a skeletal muscle, we see it has what I like to call a tube within a tube within a tube plan. The smallest tube would be the muscle fiber itself, and then the muscle fibers are combined into groups called a muscle fascicle. So the muscle fascicle would be the medium-sized tube, if you will. And a whole bunch of muscle fascicles are bundled together to form the organ that we think of as the skeletal muscle itself. Each of these tubes is surrounded by its very own connective tissue membrane. The skeletal muscle itself is surrounded by a membrane called the epimysium. Epi meaning on the outside, so it's the most outside of these membranes. The muscle fascicles are surrounded by the perimysium. And then the muscle fibers themselves are surrounded by a connective tissue membrane called the endomysium. It's called the endomysium because out of all of these mysiums or connective tissue membranes, it is the most inside one. However, a point of confusion here for students is the fact that students often want to put the endomysium inside the muscle fiber because they think, okay, endo means inside, it must be inside the muscle cell, the muscle fiber itself. But it's not. It is on the outside of the muscle fiber. It's only called the endomysium because out of all the three mysiums, it's the most inside. All three of these mysiums merge to form the tendon. And of course, the tendon connects the muscle to the bone. And this is actually really important because all of these membranes are going to transmit force from the muscle to the bone.